this tent, you know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. I'm Kev, your host as always, and I've got regular person James Cunliffe, the Lutonian journalist, alongside me. We've promised you some special episodes of this podcast over the course of this season, and we thought we'll kick it off with a bang because we are joined by the Luton Town Football Club chairman, David Wilkinson. Wilco, thanks very much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you.
Before we talk about all things 2020 club and everything else, you've been a fan of this club for a long time. Just tell everyone that's listening sort of your experiences as a fan through many decades of being a Luton fan.
Wow. Okay. I was my first game was 1958, West Ham, September 58, West Ham at home. Strangely enough, after the other day. We won 4-1, which we didn't the other day, and it hooked me from that. I was bought by an uncle. My parents were never interested in football at all, so an uncle brought me along, sat in the main stand with him, and after that game, in those days, kids could, get on a bus on their own and wander around on their own, and after that first game, I just turned up for games by myself. I brought a satchel along and sandwiches and a cup of coffee, and my mum had made, of course, and got the 321 bus from Harpenden to Park Square, walked from Park Square to the ground, used to stand around the Kenny end, because that's where the players would come in those days, and collect autographs. I've still got a few. And that was my beginning at the club, and in that first couple of years, of course, we were after that game against West Ham, which we won, we were third, I think it is. Roger Wash would have put me right, but I think we were third in the old First Division. It didn't stay that way, but it was 4 games in. And then, of course, we were in the cup final that year, which we lost. And from there on in, the next 10 years was downhill. We had some great times. We had some great players. We had some history. I think it was the early 60s when I was at the Man City Cup game when Dennis Law scored 7 goals. And I played truant to go to the replay on a Wednesday afternoon and got beaten when I went back to school the next day, which used to happen in those days. But it was worth it. All sorts of experiences in the 60s. And, of course, towards the end, and some of my favourite players were in the 60s, when Graham French, John O'Rourke, who was, I don't know why, but I think he's got our goals per game record. I don't know if he still holds it or not, but I think he does. He was a superb player to watch. He was a Kevin Phillips type striker. Really good. Best heading goal I've ever seen. He went up on the edge of the area, and literally it was like a bullet in a I can't describe it really, in a straight line from his head to the top of the net, from the edge of the area, just like a rocket. It was extraordinary, and I still remember it this day. I still remember Graham French's goal against Mansfield, but I think the whole world saw that. But there were only about 6,000 there at the time. And then, because it goes through, and then we started towards the end of the 60s, we got a good team together, and we got promotion, and then we had people like Malcolm MacDonald in the early 70s, who was great to watch, and we had, the players that sort of endless, and really it just follows on. And when my kids came, of course, I wasn't allowed to go quite so often, as happens to people, I think. So I missed quite a bit of the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And then I sort of got back into it again towards the end of the 80s. And it went on from there. And of course, there's too many things to remember, in a way. I moved when I was married, and the kids were young. I wasn't living in the area. I moved down to Sussex for a while when I was working in the city. When I came back home, which was the late 90s, I sort of re-established connection again. And that's when I bumped into John Mitchell at the garage in Harpenden, because I think he lived in Harpenden then. And he persuaded me to join this thing. I think they call it the club, or something like that, which was just spending a whole load of money to be in the old boardroom, the big one that was knocked down. And I think I paid $8,000 plus VAT to join this club of his. And it did get us in the boardroom and got you to meet people at the time. And I found out afterwards that I was the only person who'd paid money for this invitation. But anyway, the only reason for that part of the story was it got me to know a bit about what they were doing then. John Mitchell and Sherry Newbury and David Pinkney. And they tried to get me to, I was lucky enough to have a bit of money then, and they tried to get me to invest with them, but I didn't really fancy that very much.
Thank God for that.
And but I did meet in the old boardroom. I met Andrew Archer, who I'm sure most people will know or have heard of, and it was Arch that introduced me to Gary Sweet. And Gary was then looking at trying to find a way of buying the club, either buying it directly off of Pinkney, which he did offer, or basically doing what we eventually did. And he came to me with a few others with the business plan type of thing, which was the plan. The aim was to, get back ownership. We were then in the League Two, I think, weren't we? And get back from League Two to the Championship, and get a new stadium built. And of course, it went from there. And a few of us, myself, Bob Curzon, Mick Pattinson, all put a bit of money in to start the ball rolling, and bought into the club. I can't remember what the money was then, but we agreed to invest. And without knowing that we'd got a 30-point, 40-point deduction. And we tried, after we found that out, we tried to get the price down, but it was refused. So that was the beginning of it. Then Paul Ballantyne joined us, and Mike Herrick joined us a bit later, and it moved from there. So that was how it all started. And it started because we were all fans of the club, hated the way things were going. Because Gary was involved because he'd been fighting
John Gurney.
Yep. That's right. And that really led him onto it. Fighting Gurney led him into doing all this. And the plan was sold to us.
That boardroom must be quite famous, because I was in that boardroom the night that we got rid of John Gurney with Gary Sweet, funnily enough. And that boardroom would have been able to tell a few stories, I'm sure.
That's why they knocked it down, probably.
Absolutely right, yeah. So when Gary and everyone else, and they come to you, did you ever envisage a situation whereby you would be part owner of our football club, and the responsibility that comes with it, really, even more so at that time, because we really were on our knees. I hate to kind of use the term ready to be put out of business, but in all intents and purposes, we were being left to be put out of business. That's a huge responsibility to carry, even as a town fan, and I know how much the club means to you, and everyone does, obviously, but it's still a big responsibility.
I don't know whether you think about that. What do you think? You think about, I think you imagine. I think Gary sold us the story, and the story it was sold before we got points deductions, but it was credible, and we never deserved to get relegated. And I think we believed we'd get back before we did. And of course, we didn't know we were going to have the money we ended up having, because when people like Paul Ballantyne came in, it was an extra boost, financial boost for us. Because I suppose if you look back, the Championship, we were in it 5 years, probably cost us $2 million a year losses to sustain it. And that gets pretty tough. And then when you lose players, academy players that you're working through get lost because, just because you haven't got the money to sort of keep them. And you've got no restrictions from anywhere and no money for the academy. So all of that was very tough. But I don't know whether we all felt as fans. It's like we were lucky enough, all of us, to have a bit of money to put in. And I remember, I think it was James Caan, it's not James Caan, but Caan from Dragon's Den came one time to do a little documentary thing. And he was interviewing Bob Curzon in the director's box on camera. And he said, looking at why people would invest in a football club. And he said to Bob, what do you expect? Do you expect to make some money out of this? And Bob said, no. He said, no, I wrote it off from the moment I put it in. And after he'd said it, he went, oh, Dave, what have I done? He said, Lynn, that's his wife, Lynn will be watching this. But anyway, I think we all felt the same. We were supporters. We had a bit of money. We put it in. We probably expected to lose it. But you hope always that someone else will come along and keep it going. And we believed the story because we loved the club. And we shouldn't have been where we were. So there was a good chance we could revive ourselves. And with the support you get, and because the supporters stuck with us, didn't they, through the whole time, which we were anyway. So I don't think we think any differently to they do, which is, again, why you guys were trying to protect what we've got in terms of the club and the future. So no, I don't know whether I felt the responsibility. You just get on with it, and it worked. It's worked in some ways better than we ever thought it would work.
Yeah, it's all gone very well up to this point.
It is extraordinary, really. But yeah.
I mean, when you think back to it, when you first came in at the start, I mean, sort of how close was the club to being out of business?
When we were involved, I don't think when we were involved, I've never felt it ever was, because before we got involved,
that's what I meant.
It was out of business. It was in administration. They'd messed around. I mean, they were told what was going to happen. They didn't realise that administration doesn't mean the same in a football club as it does, in the real world, and that the revenue and the football league, you have to pay 100%. They didn't realise that, so that really messed up their brains. But it was out of business. If it wasn't for us coming in with what we did, it would have been out of business. It might have come back in another form like Berry has, or some of those things at some stage, but who knows? I mean, it may not have done.
Yeah.
I mean, Gary's obviously a very persuasive fellow. I know that. Anyone who's dealt with him knows that. And I remember him saying when we got relegated to the conference, we'll get this club back in the Championship, and everyone was like, what's this bloke been drinking, etc., etc. But obviously those of us who know him know that he was serious and he had a plan. But did that plan ever involve being in the Premier League 15 years later?
No. Stadium first, as you know. It was supposed to be Stadium and Championship by 2020, which is why we called ourselves 2020. And it might have always got there if it hadn't been for Brexit and COVID, because the whole stadium plans changed because of that. But if we'd been able to do retail and the original plans at Junction 10, if we'd been able to do those, we would have had enough money to build the stadium 2 years ago, I suppose. So it's had a huge impact, and thank goodness. I mean, it's fortune favours the brave, I suppose. But fortune means the Premier League helps us to do the same thing. It's not quite as much as I don't think as we would have made out of Junction 10, but it's not far off.
No. So you are chairman of the football club. You're now chairman in the Premier League. What's that like?
It's a bit early to tell. Scary, I suppose. It's different. I mean, everybody feels it's much more. What's the word? The corporate governance is a lot greater. The attention to all sorts of things which are sort of washed aside a bit in lower leagues make it. I think the comment that was made to me when literally the first comment I had after the penalty was missed was from Cliff Crown at Brentford, who said, "David, one piece of advice: staff up. You're going to need them." And I think that's one thing. You do need the staff. You do need to. It's a different league, way different. I don't want to say more professional, because that's in. I mean, I love the Championship. I think it's the best competition in the country. I mean, maybe in the world. I don't know, but it's a fantastic competition. But the Premier League is just it's mind blowing in terms of the money and the what's required in terms of due diligence, detail, and you're much more. Can't think of the word. You're much more under the microscope than you are if you're not in the Premier League. I mean, yes, the Championship were fairly, the rules were fairly strict, but nothing like what we've got with the Premier League.
Yeah, I've obviously been a fan of the Premier League from afar. It's all over our televisions. You can't watch a game of football and not see the Premier League. So you understand kind of from afar how big it is. But it's only when you really get into it that you fully understand it, isn't it? I mean, just as the Trust media officer, when I was invited by Stu and the media team to be part of the media day ahead of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we'd not even got into the Premier League yet. And the amount of TV cameras and journalists and everyone who was getting in touch with me from America and Canada. What the hell do you care about English football? But it's absolutely it is incredible what they've created. And I mean, obviously we were one of the teams that signed the thing off 30 odd years ago. So just to be part of it is, as a fan,
amazing.
it's
amazing.
incredible.
It's a wonderful experience. I don't know yet whether I'm enjoying it or not. I don't like losing. You knew you were going to.
We're kind of 38 points away from enjoying it, aren't we?
Yeah. You know you're going to lose games. You know it's going to be tough, but it's still no fun, particularly when you've had what the recent past we've had, which is basically winning a lot more than you lose. I knew it's going to happen, and I believe very strongly that our lot, our group, our footballers and our coaches are quite capable of turning it round. And I think they will. I think, they're not given much chance of it. But I from what I've heard, and when you hear Rob Edwards talk about plans and strategy, and recently, I think it's fascinating. And I think it leaves me to be quite confident that we're going to be okay.
Can I ask you about Rob? Because obviously, he came in at a time where not so much we could have sunk or swum, because we had the foundations thanks to Nathan. Obviously, he'd come back and got us in a really good place. But I've spoken to you at the last Trust AGM around about the time that you appointed Rob, and you were all blown away by him. What was it about him that impressed you all?
His whole approach, really. He was very credible, believable. He was very presentable. He did present very well, but as a person, he's very presentable too. You warm to him, and I think that we felt that would. He's a different character to Nathan. Nathan was very much, hand on heart, a passion, but very much Nathan. whereas Rob we felt was much more us, team rather than just him. And his, as I say, his presentation he made to us was second to none. It was fabulous and persuasive about the changes he was going to make. And I suspect that's changed again, but the changes he was going to make to where we were at the time and the way we played, and what he wanted. And he knew it. He knew what he wanted, and he knew how he was going to do it. And we just warmed to him.
Because there is, sorry, James.
I mean, I saw his name on the short list of managers and I thought, he's a really good manager from what he's done at Forest Green, but surely they'll never go for him because of where he's just come from.
Exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
But was the first question. What about Watford? But, he wasn't there long enough to worry about it,
no,
really,
that's what he said, yeah.
I mean, we are running out of managers that we can appoint that haven't been appointed for 5 minutes down the road, haven't we?
That's true.
I mean, obviously, he was brought in to take us to the Premier League. He wasn't brought in just to stagnate in the Championship. But to do it so quickly, just remarkable of him, really, because, yes, we were in a good place in the Championship, but I think we can all agree that the longer that season went on, the better we got because of him as a person and the way he managed his players and the style that he adopted over the second half of the season. There was times where we were drawing, he would bring a substitute on to go and win the game, and we'd win the game. Norwich at home being one such point. We'd go away from home to games where, as fans, we're going and we're kind of, well, we'll take a point here today. That's not a bad result. But no, Rob goes and Sheffield United being one, he goes and wins the game. And that's why fans have rallied around him and pretty much why we're in the Premier League.
Yes. I mean, I think the thing that I've noticed, and I don't go down very often and watch, but when I've seen him coaching, one thing that's different is that he is a one-on-one person. He talks to his players individually, and so I think they all know that he cares about them, and then I think he fits people in to the right. It's square pegs into square holes, or round pegs, and I think he does that more. Whereas I think occasionally Nathan used to sort of fill gaps with people that didn't necessarily the right people to fill in the gaps. But you mustn't forget. I mean, Rob, I forgot what I was going to say now. That the coaches, Richie and Trolls, are tremendous as well. I mean, Richie's got a fantastic reputation of coaching from England level and everything, and they are. And now, of course, you've got Macca and others coming into the setup, which I think just adds to the whole thing. I mean, it's just. In fact, I think there's as much staff now. When you go to an away game, I think there's as many staff as there are players, which shows that's the difference from when we started. You might have had a manager and an assistant, and and of course Simon was always there. But other than that, you wouldn't have many people around at all. Now it's massive, and it's great. It's great.
And another big change in the time that you guys have been in control of the club is the training ground down at the Brace. We've moved from Ely Way to an unbelievable facility down at the Brace. I must admit, I've not been down there since COVID because...
You haven't?
No, because obviously...
So you've not seen the gym then?
I haven't. I've been told about it and I've seen all the videos and everything else, and I'm looking forward to coming down when I can get a player podcast done and everything. But... even when I saw it last, it was a fantastic facility, and it's only improved since then. So
the quality of the pitches now is absolutely extraordinary. And I don't know whether you know this, I'm sure you do, but we had a standby pitch just in case the pitch at the Kenny wouldn't recover, which is a Deso pitch. It's half plastic. And we've put that down the training ground, and I think they played on it yesterday for the first time, and it may have been today, I don't know, but it's tremendous down there. The gym is extraordinary. I think we were told it was one of the biggest in football.
I have to say, gyms aren't really my... I mean, looking at me, gyms aren't really my...
I look through the window when I go down there.
It's about as close as I'll get as well. Who's Jim? What's his role? That kind of thing. But it's played a massive part in our rise, though, hasn't it? Both in recruiting players. I've spoken to a lot of players on our journey that probably wouldn't have come to Luton if we'd stayed at Ely Way, with no disrespect to Ely Way or anything. Players want the best facilities, and you guys are invested in exactly that.
Yep. Yeah. And will continue. I think that we're still trying to expand. If there's a problem, it's that it's not big enough, because there's no room there for the academy. And so we're going to have to try and expand, and there are plans. We've been trying for a couple of years now to get a dome and to move up from the academy from 3 to 2, which I think we've applied again. So we should be close to it.
I used to take my daughter to a school at the back there, because I live around the back there, so I can sometimes walk around, and I'm never around for training, but I can see the pictures. But I've never seen anybody on that patch of land where you wanted to put the dome, even though the council said, yeah, we might need that.
I know, and the pitch is in a dreadful condition too, aren't they?
Yeah.
But no, there were various things that locked it up, mostly politics. But I think it's opening up now. In fact, it may be us that's delaying now rather than them.
Is it still that piece?
Because we've had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
They. But,
Well, you mentioned...
it's still we hope.
Yeah.
You mentioned expansion. Let's talk about our beautiful home, which has been expanded in the last few weeks. First of all, a shout out to everyone involved in getting a whole stand built in 13 weeks. It's just an incredible achievement from everyone involved.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And everybody who's done it needs a huge, huge thanks. It can't be something that's ever happened before. It's hard because you're sort of, you see it when it starts, you see it when it finishes. You don't really see quite often. I mean, Gary did, but those that aren't there every day don't see the amount of work that's gone into it. It's phenomenal. If you get round and underneath and everything, and look at the TV studio and everything, it's extraordinary, the work. And the gantry, they say, and I think Sky have said recently, that it's the best view in football.
We've sent James up there. He's been up there for the last 2 home games. So do you...
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed it. I had a little look in where the TV cameras go.
Oh, you did, did you?
They weren't there at that time. That was a Gillingham game that I went in there. But yeah, it was great. Even when the rain came, I didn't mind. It was quite a good view. I could see it. It's unique because being over there, usually sat in the main stand and having that view, and then to go over the other side and see, you can actually watch the action from a different perspective because you see the fans and how they are. So it's quite unique.
Well, as someone who's watched it from the other side for a long time, the football's always on that side, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why that is, but it's always over there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't.
And then it's always over there behind a pillar.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't see it all.
I did have to joke because there was a tiny little rope hanging down from the top of the gantry, and I thought, well, they're just trying to make me feel at home here by placing a post in the way. I mean, it's only the thickness of a rope, but I kind of appreciated it.
We get used to it. It would be awful when we don't have one, actually, because mine's in right there. It sort of doesn't quite get the corner flag, but nearly.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, and it actually brings out more beauty in Kenilworth Road. You know, I remember we all cherish Kenilworth Road. You know, we've all got God knows how many memories there, and the day when we do leave will be a sad day, albeit a good one for the club as a whole. But actually, when I went to the Gillingham game, which wasn't the first time I'd seen the stand secretly, we have our trust meetings at the club every other month, and I kind of had a sneak peek out of one of the windows just to see what it was like. But when you see it on for the first time and everything, it just adds to the beauty of Kenilworth Road.
It does, and it's even better than when I can remember standing in the 60s, standing in the bobbers, because in those days it wasn't divided, so you were mixed up, and it was always quite lively in there. But it was a good place to be, standing, because it was tight and quite active.
And obviously we've seen a Premier League game there now against West Ham United. We've seen 3 Premier League games overall. We've I think Rob's admitted that we've improved in each one.
Yep.
I certainly think the West Ham game was our best game so far.
Yep.
And obviously going forward, we hope that that improvement will happen. And one of the reasons why will be a successful transfer window, which has just concluded. How happy are the people behind the scenes with the transfer window?
I think very. I think that it's always tough, particularly when you're trying to, play with relatively small money compared to the rest of the league. I think that I can't remember now. I think we're somewhere around 20 million of transfer money in total, and I think we played an under-21 game the other day where the keeper was 20 million quid. And we reportedly Chelsea have spent $1 billion or something. It's in the last.
That's just crazy money,
months.
isn't it? When you come up against it, and 20 million is a lot of money for Luton Town. I mean,
Well, it's a lot of money, full stop.
it's a lot of money. I wouldn't mind 20 million, but yeah, I mean, I've sort of broken the transfer record 3 times this summer, and still.
But I don't know about you guys, but I'd much rather find players that you can develop and that get better than have somebody who comes in at the age of, 29 for 100 million, and he's done it, and now he's got it, and he's there. And I'd much rather have people who are hungry still.
I don't think.
But I'm a Luton fan. That's what we are like, isn't it? I mean, the ones you love the most are the ones that have done had the succession or the progression with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the current side, Pelly, Ruddock and Panzu being, he's kind of synonymous with 2020, really, isn't he? Because, he's been right on your journey. And
people like him, Luke Berry,
Dan Potts as well,
Potts.
another one, James Shea, been with us since the League 2 days. Actually, as a fan, I'm kind of glad that those people are still around, because not just as a reminder of where we've come from, because we should never forget, just because we're in the Premier League now, we should never forget, that journey that we've been on. It should always fuel us to improve, as it has done right through that time. So to have those guys with us kind of shows not just us, but the whole football pyramid. Look, you can do this on a shoestring or slightly more, and you don't have to have these investors. You don't have to get into the troubles that in our times we've gone past the Derbys, the Readings, the Wigans of this world, who've obviously had their points deductions and their troubles. But you can do it the right way, and you can still be in the Premier League. You can bring Luke Berry off the bench in the Premier League, and he'll be absolutely fine in the Premier League. You can play Pelly in the Premier League from the conference, and he's absolutely fine at that level. It can be done.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, I don't know any of my peers anyway who would think differently. I mean, they all like seeing young players progress. I have to say, sometimes you think when they're lent out, you feel a bit sorry that they're not there, but you're always hoping they come back better. But yeah,
there's something for me that doesn't sit right about spending £100 million on one player anyway. And when you think of the amount of money that it's probably costing you guys to get Power Court there, and Chelsea probably spent that in a week on a couple of players, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Really.
What can you say? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, that's what we're up against. It's why the promoted clubs struggle so much. I mean, even the bigger ones, even those that have spent money, like Burnley, it's never easy. And it's a bigger challenge when you're fighting like we are. We're good underdogs, aren't we? We always have been good underdogs. Even last year. No, Luton aren't good. Yeah, what was it? How many was it? Teams like Luton. Was it 5 managers? God, we shouldn't be losing to teams like Luton.
Yeah. I mean, Hull sacked their manager before we even arrived, didn't they? I mean, that was quite novel, that one.
I think it suits us better being like that. I can't imagine us being different. Can you imagine us having that sort of money to spend? And if we did, what would happen? I just don't know.
I don't think I'd like it. But you do see, I mean, they've got more money anyway, but the likes of Newcastle, when they got taken over by effectively a country, and suddenly all the criticism about those owners and where they've come from and some of the things they do outside of football didn't mean anything because they suddenly had all this money and now they find themselves
They've won
in
a game or two,
the Champions League.
Yeah.
And how quickly it changes. I hope it never gets to that point.
No, I hope so too. But who knows what the future holds?
I mean, we obviously love the way that we do things as a club. We love the way that 2020 run the club and everything else. But now we're in the Premier League, there's a lot of scrutiny on us, and there's an awful lot of, for the want of a better phrase, bollocks spoken. And, fair bits of criticism have come our way about the way we do things. Do you guys...
Like what sort of things?
Sort of, because we don't spend £50 million on a player, not from Luton fans, from the supposed bigger fans of bigger clubs and things like that, who don't understand Luton. You've got to come to the Premier League. We give you 100 million. You've got to spend it on your players, and you've got to make an effort. And if you don't, people like Garth Crooks are going to say they can't take you seriously. Do you guys kind of take any notice of that? Do you think it's disrespectful, that comment in particular that he said?
Totally. I mean, we deserve to be where we are.
Absolutely.
We ended up third in the Championship. Whatever you think about playoffs, we ended up third, and we've climbed the leagues from our own good work. I mean, and the players that we've had over the years have got us there, and we deserve to be there. The fact that we're not Man City or Newcastle or whoever else it is irrelevant. One day we might be. It's a cyclical business, isn't it? I mean, we can remember the days when Huddersfield were a top team in the top of the first division, or I don't know, Blackpool or whoever. And so it's possible. But we've got to stick to our philosophy and our roots. And that's the thing that we mustn't change. We mustn't ever be, chasing the dream, which is not us, And I think, there are lots of things that can happen. We can get much more involved with our community than we are. And I think that'll happen, is happening, and I think it'll happen more. But I think it's the most important thing, is to get involved with your own people, not trying to attract outsiders too much.
I think the dream has been chased in the right way, though, hasn't it? Because,
yes, it has.
Like you say, Gary sold you the vision of getting out of the conference, getting to the Championship. You did that a year earlier than you expected to, so achieved the dream there. And then, the dream of that Championship final and what happened there must have been out of this world. It was for the fans, but what about for you guys?
Well, of course it was. I mean, it was unbelievable. And it was terrifying. It was an awful. I hated every minute of the game until the penalty was missed. I've never been so, I don't know what, scared. But of course, it was the best thing that's ever happened to us. But it still, in some ways, hasn't sunk in. I don't know whether you find the same, but for me, it hasn't. You still, you go along to. I have never been to Brighton before, but I thought it was a nice enough place, but nothing special. A bit soulless.
Oh, very much soulless. Yeah, absolutely.
We'd been to Chelsea before, and it was okay, but we've been to Sunderland, and we've been to Wembley a few times in our history. So so far, nothing's really. We haven't won anything yet. Maybe that's part of the reason, but it still hasn't sunk in. And I think perhaps, I don't know what it is, first win, I don't know what it'll be. But, it's a wonderful place to be, but I don't feel it yet.
There's been a bit of a stop-start season.
Well, that's horrible, isn't it? Isn't that horrible?
The postponed games, international breaks, which I can't
break is terrible.
Yeah, I'm glad that all the players are playing for their countries and they're going off and doing that. Yeah. But for fans, it's just dead 2 weeks, and
you can't. There's not much else to watch either.
No, I mean, I watched Chio playing for Ireland against France.
Yeah,
and I thought, well, I want to get involved in this because he's our player.
Yeah,
and you want him to do well and everything else. But then you're like, international football, apart from in a tournament, it's not brilliant. It's not England. Yeah, I hope he does well, but is there something else on the other side? No, well, there isn't. Well, I'll keep on watching it then. But if there was, and it's like, having James is right. I mean, we're coming up to 5-6 weeks after the season actually started. In fact, it was
And
6
we
weeks
played
ago
3
this
games.
Saturday that you and I shared a beer in Germany. So 5
Yes.
weeks since the season started. And we've played 3 games. Yeah, it's unheard of,
Well,
really.
we would have played about 7.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
that's the thing. I keep on seeing all these League 1 and League 2 fixtures pop up on my live score thing, and I'm like, why are they playing friendlies in this? Oh no, of course they're not playing. When we were in Germany, I got a notification on my phone because QPR were playing Watford that day, and I've got friends who are QPR fans, so obviously I wanted QPR to win that game. So I was keeping an eye on they had their score on there flashing up, and initially I thought, why are they playing a friendly 7 days before they're going to play each other in the league? Because we would normally have started the league on that day, wouldn't we? And then it dawned on me, we're in the Premier League and they're in the Championship. And I thought, Germany was great anyway, but then that was just fantastic. It was it was grand. Just on Germany, obviously it was great to go and experience a different culture. And as a fan, I think, with no disrespect to the players or anyone that was involved, the games were fine, they were good, but the whole experience was kind of the culture and everything else about that. Is there a chance that could happen in other countries in future pre-seasons, perhaps?
Don't see why not. I mean, we've had games pre-season in Slovenia, and we had one in Portugal, and that's when we were at lower levels. I'd have thought now. The Premier League does stuff as well. I mean, I think they had a competition in America.
I did
they?
see that, yeah.
West Ham and Brentford.
I can't decide if I wanted us to be involved in that or not. I love America, but it just felt all
But I don't know
staged.
whether it was obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether. I just think, I mean, of course the fans like it. I like it, and I'm sure it will happen. And Rob will like it. I think it depends. I think how the league. Like you said, stop-start, and because I don't know, it's sort of, perhaps we're not yet used to it. We haven't settled. Once we get settled and we've got a process and we can work our way through things, maybe that'll. But I can't see any reason why we wouldn't have one. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. Got
wet, didn't we?
We did. It was absolutely fine when you came over, and then by the time we'd finished our beers, my word, did the heavens open. You haven't seen rain like it, James, I'll tell you. It was. I felt sorry actually, because the first team played in beautiful sunshine, didn't they?
They did.
And then poor old Matt Macy, he was warming up on the pitch, and obviously, many Luton fans that didn't really take to him because of the mistakes that he made way back when in League Two and things like that. And he's fine. He had that look on his face, didn't he? Finally, I'm going to get my chance to prove in front of these fans that and the heavens open. It's like, no, and now I've got this soaking wet ball. I've got absolutely no chance. And
But Luke Berry did his usual, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Bless him.
He did. It was absolutely. It was a great experience. Really enjoyed it. As I say, the games were good and they were fine, but the whole experience. If we could have a regular one I'm sure fans would take it up and. The club would make from it as much as off the pitch as on the pitch, sort of thing, with travel and everything else. So that would be fantastic if we could. If we could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, but everything's a new thing at the moment, isn't it? So that's probably what it is. If it doesn't quite feel like the season's got going yet, but
no, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
I think that there's obvious factors, like you say. The first win will be a memorable day, and hopefully it's soon. But it's just one of those things. We're also going to have to get used to playing less games as well, because the Premier League we play once a week most of the time, really, now, rather than.
Well, the second half of the season's a bit busier, isn't it? Because I can't remember how many. Is it only 16 games? Is it
16? Yeah, because that was that silly comment about us being relegated by Christmas, wasn't it? We can't be relegated by Christmas. I think it's 18 before, 20 after, because. I think it's 54 points or something, and you worked it out. So,
I mean, it's mathematically impossible to be relegated before Christmas. So that is one thing about that comment.
I don't know why you're even thinking that way.
No, indeed.
No, it's just in response to Garth Crooks, really. Just,
no comment.
It's impossible, but no, I mean, I'm still of the view that it's going to be a successful season. It's just.
I think we bought well. I mean, from what I can gather, we haven't seen much of them yet. That the players are fitting in well down in the Breche, and they're getting on. They're mixing well, which is important. I don't yet know. I don't think Rob knows what his final best team is yet. Why? How would he? They haven't played much, have they?
Yeah, well, that's another thing as well, isn't it? That trying to embed 12 new players into a squad is always going to be quite tricky anyway. So there's that element as well. Whereas in previous seasons,
Well, it was as many as that last season, wasn't it? Near enough.
yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah,
8 or 9, anyway.
Yeah.
So it. You always think it's not, but it's half a squad near enough, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I guess it's because we've got this through line of players that have come up from either the Conference or League Two, and they're still there. I know we've just seen Glenn Ray leave, which we were all a little bit gutted about because he was one of these great characters and such an influential player in those 3 seasons in those 3 different divisions as well.
And more recently, Alan Campbell, of course, which is,
But I mean, that is going to happen, isn't it? There's
football.
So there's no room for sentimentality and
it's
in football.
it is a different game in the Premier League, isn't it? I mean, that's one thing you do notice, don't you? I'm not sure really. You get an awful lot of round the back and
round the back. Yeah. Well, we spoke about this on the last episode of how that may be the way people play anyway, and I think it probably is. But West Ham almost took the sting out of the crowd by doing that because it was just quite boring. Really, they didn't do anything.
Yeah, they're not.
Brighton was similar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Similar kind of football.
They're not very
And then
social,
whoosh.
are they? Once they get the ball off you, they don't give it back to you very easily, do they? At least in the Championship, they let you have a go every now and again.
And we're really friendly because we give it away quite a lot.
and
That's because we're nice people.
Indeed, absolutely right. And I suspect as we go forward, that's one of the things that we'll learn in this league. Once you've got it, keep hold of the bloody thing, because they're not going to give it back to you without a fight. It's yeah, it is crazy. When players leave, obviously do you have more of an attachment to players now that you're chairman of the club than do you kind of feel slightly deeper with players, particularly the ones that leave? Obviously Alan, Glenn, Danny.
I think you try not to. I mean, I think it's a bit like there are some that you get attached to. I mean, not to them, but in your head. I mean, I've asked, I mentioned before Luke Berry. I mean, he's been with us a long time. You feel sorry for a player who's been injured so often, who's obviously talented, and who, has got more goals per minute than whatever it is than most other people. And those sorts of people, I think, Pelly, who else would do? Those, I think you have an attachment, only a sort of sentimental attachment to those. I think mostly you try not to. And football is so horrible, really, isn't it?
Ruthless, isn't it?
It is horrible. It's ruthless. And I think you just because we I don't know. We have to work out how many players we've had since we got involved. But it must be a lot.
Yeah, you'd probably be surprised once you totted them all up and counted them. A hell of a lot of players.
Particularly in the conference days, wasn't they? Because, manager turnover was quite big in the conference and they all want their own players, don't they? And
it's that. And the other thing we were talking about the other day was how many grounds we've been played at in a competition since we got involved. And that must be verging on 200, I should think.
Yeah, I would imagine so, yeah.
And that's it. Nobody else could have possibly been there.
No, I don't think many people have been stuck it.
Because you have those
Hartlepool on a Tuesday night.
No, I was there.
Because you have those people, don't you, who try and do the 92 grounds. And you look at, who's getting promoted from the conference. And as a Luton fan, well, actually, we went there when we were in the conference. That's handy. We've already done that one, as opposed to, when someone else, like a Harrogate or someone, no disrespect to them, when they come up, oh, no, we're never going to play them. So I'm going to struggle to, we played them in the cup in the home game, didn't we?
Yeah,
Whereas when Wrexham and Notts County get promoted last season, well, we've already done those ones. That's fine.
We've both been in the first division, haven't we?
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So not so much with players. How about with managers then? Because obviously you guys employ those a little bit more directly than the players. The manager kind of chooses his players, whereas you choose the manager. And I'm kind of thinking, one manager in particular, John Still.
There's a personal thing. I suppose I can tell a story about this. for most managers, you accept it as part of the game. With John, it was different. John is the only one that the whole board went to say, "Time's up, John." And most of us had tears in our eyes when we were doing it, because he did so much for the club and he was such a lovely man. And most of the others, you're sort of involved in the dismissing of, I mean, I was a bit involved with Paul Buckle and Gary and I with Richard Money and
I mean, those two, it was pretty obvious that time had run its course, wasn't it? Particularly Richard Money. I mean, he was going mental in the media as well as everything. It was obvious. And obviously Paul Buckle, I mean, we just had that brilliant day against Norwich, but then we followed it up by losing in the FA Trophy, didn't we? Which kind of summed it all up. And you could tell again,
but if you think
he wasn't taking us where you wanted us to go.
If you think of the other most successful manager we've had since we've been there, was Nathan. Because Nathan did things which made you love him less. So when he left the first time, it was not very nice.
No.
And the second time wasn't quite so bad, but because you sort of expected it.
Once they've done it once, they do it again, sort of thing.
We were a bit protected that time, so it was better. But I don't think you felt badly about it particularly. It's just that, not me, but Gary and his group then have to have all the work to do to replace. That's the tough thing. You're not so worried about losing them. It's finding the right one. And the great thing that Mick and Gary and those have done is to put, the shortlist has always been a bloody good shortlist. And it's always been both Nathan's case and Rob's case. They presented so brilliantly to the board, because they were the only two, I think, that were actually, again, they were the only two that were interviewed by the board rather than, perhaps Gary and me or whatever. And they both presented brilliantly and blew people away at presentations.
Well, we're so delighted that Rob's our manager, both for the person that he is and the coach that he is. And we're hoping that he's around for a long time. Obviously, with success, we'll obviously bring suitors towards him, which hopefully we can fend off if the time arrives. Because hopefully he's going to be the man who leads us into Power Court. Gary said to Sky a couple of weeks ago, 3 years away perhaps? Is that,
I guess,
sounding about right?
Probably, yes. I know that things have been delayed a bit recently because of all the work at the stadium, because it's basically the same project team.
Yeah, understandable that though, isn't it?
And the plan
so just to clarify that, obviously the people who built the bobbers are the people who are going to be working on Power Court, and obviously you can't be in two places at the same time.
Well, yes, but the architects as well, and all those sorts of guys, and the engineers are involved or have been involved in the work at the Kenny, and so they would be following on. And there's also work needed to get to detailed planning, which was planned, and I'm not actually totally up to date because we had a board meeting today, but it didn't include developments. But it was intended that planning would be before the end of the year, and that we would have a spade in the ground next year. But I suspect that might have been put back a little. But when you've been waiting 50 years, what does a year have a difference?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the main thing is that you can clarify that all is on track.
Yeah. Power
Court is still going to happen. Absolutely. Because, everyone, like you say, we've been waiting so long, and, there's that tender nature in society, really, that you think the worst rather than the best of things. But Power Court is there. It's part of the plans. We will be in Power Court. If it's not dead on 3 years, like Gary said, don't hold you accountable, but we will be in Power Court.
Yeah, absolutely. And it won't be a soulless stadium. I mean, the amount of time and money that's been spent already on things like acoustics and all that, if it's possible to have a new stadium with atmosphere and Kenny would be Kenny-like, it will be. I've been going to Kenilworth Road since 1958, so 65 years, and I just hope that we did get it done in that time, because I'd like to see it. But I shall miss the Kenny terribly.
We all will.
Obviously it's going to be a very sad day when it actually happens.
It's home, really. It's second home.
Well, yeah, exactly. So many great memories there, and particularly in the last decade as well for us.
I won't miss the photos of the Oak Road stand on social media, I must admit. But the rest of the Kenny, absolutely.
I don't even mind that. It's part of us, isn't
it? It is.
I
quite right.
I love it because they dislike it so much.
Yeah. But it's like, again, when people say about players, how much character is so important. When you're thinking back at players you've liked in the time, they're not necessarily the best footballers, but the ones you've noticed most. It still applies a bit. There's still a lot of players that are they're good, but dull.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the character aspect where, particularly when talking about the ground, is what everybody loves about Kenilworth Road, but obviously they're thinking about how's that going to transfer to Power Court. Are there some things that have impressed you about the little things, the extra added touches that will try and make it a home?
Well, it's everything from how close to the pitch can we be, how steep can the rake be in the stands, what can we do about sort of closing things in which will make it feel tighter, where will people stand, where will anything that is a little bit quirky that you can fit into it without it costing a ridiculous amount of money.
Mm.
And of course, acoustics, like I said. I noticed, I don't know whether you did, but I couldn't understand it really. When you go to Sheffield United, the away end has like curtains underneath the roof, which deadens the sound. I remember we were sitting in the director's box. I said, "We're very quiet today," and it was because these curtains are up. Now that's ridiculous, isn't it? What you want is the opposite, because you create a atmosphere by the away fans, really, don't you? The best atmospheres we have at the Kenny are when the away fans are noisy and so I couldn't understand that. But so acoustics are really important.
I think it started snowing that day, so I'm kind of glad there were them curtains above us, because it's cold enough as it was without the snow coming in. That is for sure. That's one thing that hopefully Power Court will have roofs that go right the way to the front, because we've already been to 2 grounds where the roofs only go to about 5 or 6 rows from the front, and if you're one of those, particularly at Chelsea, because enough bomb it down before that game as well. It was
absolutely.
It was ridiculous.
I wouldn't mind if a few quid was spent on recreating them having away fans having to walk through somebody's garden, so they continue to hate it. Just put some washing up or something like that, or employ an actor to just like.
Well, I think that the plan at the moment, I've last seen. The river's going to be there, and I think we're going to bring the river out, or you'll be able to see. Not that the river's huge, but it's something. Little things, little quirky things to add to it. But there's still time.
Let's finish this podcast off, then walk over with a couple of questions for you. First of all, 15 years or so that 2020 have been in control of our club. Obviously, that penalty at Wembley was a particular highlight. But what other sort of special memories can you sort of share with us from the inside of 2020 in that time?
You mean games-wise?
Literally anything that kind of warmed your heart from that sort of 15 years.
JPT, without doubt. Because, it was everything, wasn't it? It was Mick, it was us, it was a great game, it was 42,000, whoever it was.
It was exactly what you said earlier about us being great underdogs as well.
It was fantastic, for everything, and the fact we weren't allowed to defend it was a bit sad. That was one of my best ever, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
I rather liked it when Mick managed us at Sunderland. Because Mick is, Mick, it's his club really, even though but it's his second club, and his sister's got a box there and all sorts of stuff. But when he managed us to that game up there, after Nathan left, I think was a bit special.
I was a bit worried that day because obviously Nathan had been so successful. And it was only our first season in League One.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go if it had all gone Pete Tong. And I didn't go up there thinking, oh no, we're going to lose now because Nathan's gone, because I still had belief in the same players. But you just didn't know, because Sunderland were a big side for that level as well.
Yeah.
But then before the game, because the players, they warm up at the other end to the away end at Sunderland, don't they, as that kind of intimidating thing. Then they all came over. I think Sheehan was captain at the time, marched them all over, clapped the Luton fans, and I thought, yeah, no, everything's fine. We're going to be fine from here on in. And it was just that weird feeling that where I went to Sunderland with all those doubts in my head, hadn't even seen a ball kicked. No, we're going to be fine for the rest of this season. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Then, because it goes both ways, bad memories was without doubt York in the playoff final.
Yeah, even more so when we saw the replays afterwards.
And the offside goal.
Yeah.
Did that hurt you more than the Wimbledon one?
Yeah, much more. I've seen pictures of myself. I mean, I don't think I've ever looked in such despair. Gary and I together. I mean, it was just awful. And then afterwards, we did realise at the time that it was offside, but afterwards you didn't realise how offside it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I had people texting me, you won't believe how far offside that was. And I was like,
we weren't particularly close to York.
No, indeed.
Yeah.
Probably still aren't, to be fair.
No, but you know what I mean in that way. So that was a bad memory, really bad memory.
I spoke to Gary actually in the bowels of Wembley after that game and said, well, what does this mean for the club going forward? And he just sort of said, well, we're probably going to have to find £1 million to carry on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
was true.
Yeah.
In fact, it was probably 2 million.
Yeah.
But no, the Wimbledon one wasn't quite the same because people had a bit of sympathy for Wimbledon.
Yeah.
It was odd. I mean, it was what was it, Jason Walker that we were all cross with, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it was as bad. And then, of course, the last year's playoff final was just something else, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But in a way, both Sunderland games were fantastic, weren't they?
Both times we've lost in the playoffs in the league, the Blackpool one and the Huddersfield one.
Yeah.
I kind of think they done us a favour because it gave us motivation from the season before. But actually, we started that following season in a much better place than we were in those playoff games. Obviously, James Collins came in after the Blackpool to get us promoted, and then obviously Carlton Morris came in after the Huddersfield one to get us promoted. So I'm not really religious or anything, and I don't necessarily think things happen for a reason, but maybe those two defeats did happen for a reason.
Yeah, I suppose that's possible.
But it'd have been nice to have £100 million season earlier, wouldn't it?
People always, we always obviously complained about being in the conference, but rather like you're saying there, in fact, it did us huge amount of good. I mean, it took a while for the crowd to turn, didn't it? And John Still and who was it? Shees, wasn't it?
Ronnie Henry, wasn't it?
Ronnie. It was Ronnie, of course. Started to turn, but those 5 years put our feet on the ground, and everybody then came to the same base, didn't they? And expectations were not so great. And everybody's pulled together since then, which I think is rather like you're saying about losses. I think it helps, particularly when you're underdogs. It helps you to have that little bit of extra oomph, which is from I suppose it's not failure, is it? I mean, in some ways, we enjoyed the conference because there's some lovely people down there, which is not so much true.
Yeah, I imagine it's a little bit more cutthroat in the Premier League.
The thing about, I can't say much about the Premier League because we've only had 2 games away, but in the Championship, it was you realise how different you are. You realise that you're a fan. They're your fans. You're a fan, and you're going into a boardroom in a club where probably the owner's not there. Probably the chairman's not wanting to talk to you, and it's different, and it's slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be many Premier League chairmen owners that are just going to rock up to a pub on an away game with the Luton with their own fans and just sort of stand there and have a drink and a chat. It's a nice touch that
or buy me a beer in Germany like Wilco did before that second Bochum game. Absolutely.
Well, I don't know. It's a different world, and you adapt to it, don't you? And you can't be too critical of it, because what it's going to do for the club and the town. I mean, it's great for us.
Well, life-changing is what Gary said, really.
Absolutely.
And it is.
We have to live with it and take the rough with the smooth.
And just to finish off then, Wilco, obviously we're on the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. Just how important over the last 20 years have the Trust been, and how important will we be, hopefully, in the next 20 years and beyond?
Well, obviously very. I mean, apart from now, it's obligatory, isn't it, to be close to your supporters groups, particularly in the Premier League, with the fan-led review and all those things. The connection's really important. But without you guys, I mean, it was really you guys that made it happen in the first place, wasn't it? Because Gary sort of helped put you all together, and you backed him, and he's made it happen with our support and help. And so it's one thing. It all goes together. And those that aren't members of the trust, in a way, are all still part of it too, if they're a fan of the club. And I liked I think we were talking the other day about bringing in all the foreign supporters clubs, which I think are on your list, aren't they? And I couldn't believe there were so many of them. But I think that's the great thing, is bringing everyone together. There's a danger in the Premier League of a losing connection a bit if you're not careful, because you don't want to become a club that just sells tickets through a travel agent or whatever, and I think that connection is vital. And as far as I'm concerned, if I'm around, anything I can do about it, and that's one of the most important things of all. And because you're always there. Players move on, managers move on, we'll move on, because we'll, getting old a bit. But you're always there. Fans always there. It's the fan that supports the club.
And of course, the club gave the trust access to the image rights to ensure that we are in control of those things, to make sure that all of this thing that we've seen around the world of different colours or different crests or different names or everything else that's been threatened cannot happen to our clubs. So from that point of view, we'll always maintain that, and we'll always be here for Luton supporters, and always right behind you guys, because without 2020, football wouldn't be existing in Luton, let alone Premier League football. So myself and James, we thank yourself as you're here in front of us, but everyone on that 2020 board for everything that you've done. We're enjoying the Premier League. Yeah, okay, we'd enjoy it more if the boys on the pitch get a few more results, but we're going to these places that we literally didn't even dream of 10 years ago because it was so far away.
Yeah.
But now it's a reality, and it's a reality because of you guys. So on behalf of us, the Trust, and Luton fans, whether they're members of the Trust or not, thank you very much for everything that you've done for our club, and thank you for coming on our podcast today. We really appreciate it. You've been wonderful, and hopefully we can have you on again next season when you can tell us what the second season in the Premier League is like.
Indeed you can, yes, I will. But thank you for supporting us, and without you we're nothing. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the season.
We certainly will do, and we'll keep on singing, and obviously we'll represent you guys in the stands, and we'll see you in some, I'm no doubt sure, pubs outside some away ends as we go along throughout the course of the season. Wilco, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching or listening. If you do want to subscribe to our channel, please do. Every time excellent episodes like this with Wilco and other members of the club or Boardroom or anyone else that we can get on come along, you'll get notified when they drop. But until then, thanks very much to the Hightown Club for hosting us. If you like our intro, thanks very much to Sean, Grant and the Wolfgang for providing us with that, and to Ed Smith Creative, who's done all of our imagery and everything else. Thanks to everyone, but most importantly, thanks to Wilco, thanks to James for being here, and thanks for you to watch and listen. And until next time, come on, you Hatters.
Can you believe it? We are Premier League! Yes!
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.